Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's class. So today we'll continue from where we stopped with server-side rendering. We'll do a little bit of recap. So we understand that server-side rendering means the server generates the HTML page with data already included before sending it to the browser. So for server-side rendering, we are not sending empty HTML pages anymore to the browser. We are sending already loaded pages with data. So the whole API call has been made, data has been retrieved, and then we are now sending not just the HTML, but we are sending HTML with updated data. Thereby, because of that, server-side rendering provides fresh data always, and it also gives advanced performance for SEO. Since search engines see the real content, not just empty HTML with JavaScript, right? So then it also improves performance, right? So browsers don't need to fetch data and render every time. Server uh, does the fetching of data and also handles the rendering of the data. Okay, I think that's something that Udo was confused about in the last class. I believe that's clear now. So from the last class, we already had our initial page, which is where we displayed our. So I think at the last class we were working with products, but I had to change that to users. So you are using the same API, but in this case we are getting users, not post anymore, right? You can always change it back and use post anyways. But let's work with users for now. So we're able to make our API call using our get server, and we're able to pass that the result to our props, and then we provided our props for our users page, and then we're able to display our users. We can go ahead and look at see what that looks like again. So as you can see, we have our users displayed here. Okay. Now we want to see user details, okay? So we want to be able to see dynamic user information, right? So we're going to still utilize our dynamic page, which we already created before. All we'll do is write the logic to handle that process, okay? So remember we are using get server-side props. So let's say export async get server-side props. And in this case, we are going to be utilizing the context, okay? So we can now, since we are going to be passing the ID, we want to access the ID first from the context and say equals to context dot params. And then we can now handle our try catch, okay? So for our try catch, we want to, so I'll explain this. So for our try catch, we want to have our users, and then remember that we already created this fetch user by ID inside our helper. So we have this function already created where we are passing the base URL and then the route where the users will be, and then we want to pick them based on their IDs. So after handling this, for a successful response, we want to pass the user information as props, okay? Then we are also having our catch, since it's a try catch block. We also have our catch where we are handling our error, okay? Then we also have not found to show that, okay, we couldn't find this particular ID, okay? Now, because we have provided these props, we can now access these props here in our component. We can now access these props here in our component, okay? Now, if we console.log this. So let's take this out for a second. Let's utilize the console to see what we have. So if we console.log this, when we click on user details, we should be able to see the details for that user in our console. Okay. So like this now, we see that this user's ID is 1, just like I see in the URL user/1. And then we see the email, the company this user is attached to, and then the user's address, and we can see their name, phone number, username, website. Okay. So from our UI here, we have user.name, user.email, and then we have a button that should take us back to the previous page. So let's go ahead and save this and see what it looks like. All right, so as you can see now, we are displaying the user's name and the user's email. So if we go back and then we click on another user, we should be able to dynamically see the user's name too and the user's email. Likewise, every other user on this list. Okay, are we together? Are we together? Udo, are you with me? Michelle and Mohammed. Are you following? Is everyone following me? Okay, so Michelle, you're with me. Mohammed, Udo, I don't see a response from you. Udo, are you with us? Okay, Udo doesn't seem to be responding, so let's go ahead. Okay, you are with us. All right, good. Okay, so now we can see we have handled server-side rendering in the pages structure, right, of Next.js. So what I want to do now is see what it looks like in the app structure. Okay, so let's just open our app structure and see how we can work with that. All right, so we have our app structure now. Okay, hold on. Yeah, so we have our app structure and we'll be using a lot of code that we already have. So I'll just explain a little bit of, give you a little context to how it works here, okay? So now, with regards to Next.js app router, server components are SSR by default. So basically, all these components, except components that are marked with use clients. Okay, so any component that is not marked with use client up here is automatically or will automatically be utilizing server-side rendering. Okay, so remember that we are marking use, when we mark a component with use client, is because we want to utilize hooks. Okay, within that particular component, say if we want to handle life cycle with use effect and others, we will need to mark it with use client. If not, it will not run the use effect, because use effect now is a client side code hook, right? It doesn't actually affect the server side. So when we want to handle hooks that are particularly for client side rendering, we will need to mark the components with a use client tag, okay, to make sure that the browser recognizes this page as a client page, not a server-side page. Now, on default, all Next.js app components or app pages are server-side rendered. Okay, so for us to utilize server-side rendering in Next.js, we utilize the fetch to call APIs. So the fetch is built into Next.js too. Okay, if you, let's go and let's look at our fetch. So we have get user. So as you can see, we have fetch here. This fetch is a server, is a Next.js provision. Okay. You can also handle routing via the app components. That is folder-based routing, right? Then you already know how we handle the dynamic routes. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and see the differences, right? Okay, so let's assume we want to handle our get user, okay? So basically, if we want to handle our get users, let's handle it within our get users page. So that, so let's say page, okay? So let's not use a use effect for this. Let's just handle everything here. So I'll take out some code from here so that we don't get confused. Okay. Okay, let's do this. We can still utilize that. Then let's remove this. Okay. So are we good? Can we go on? So over here, what you need to understand is once you have an async function, right? This async function fetches directly from the server. Okay. So what we do is we now have our response, await, then we have our fetch. So we are using over here, we are using uh, our custom API that was created. So we want to change that and utilize our free API. Okay. All right. So now we have no, it's not what I want. Uh, JSON placeholder, yeah. Okay. So now we have our get users, okay? So for us to make sure that this runs, to ensure that it fetches fresh data every time without any caching. That is, we don't want to cache data, we just want to fetch data. We want to have fresh data every time we utilize this particular function, right? So we are going to add cache no store, okay? So what this does is it ensures fresh data is fetched on every request. Okay. So for every request that we make from this API, it's always going to provide us with fresh data. Are we together? Now we come to our code, right? So let's not use this first. Let's take out the use effect. Okay. Because I don't want this to be a client application. Then we can remove this, and then we can, okay, all right. So now, let's, let's just cut this off. So now we can say const users equals to await get users, okay? Mm, okay. So that's because we've not defined it as an async function, okay? So now this is a typical app page, okay? That is app structure page. This is what a typical app structure page will look like. Now, this async function automatically is, or by default, is a server-side rendered page. Okay, so every time this page loads, it's going to always make this API call to big data, because without this API call being successful, we cannot even send anything to the front end. So this particular API call is important for even our HTML to display on the browser, because now it is a server that is handling everything that has to do with rendering. Okay. Now that we have users, we can visualize users in our browser. So on the console, let's just go ahead and see what users look like on the console. Okay. Okay. Okay, I've not run this server. Please acknowledge we are together. Nobody's confused. Are we together so far? Okay, okay, excellent. All right. So as you can see, when you come to, you see that it is marked as server over here. So you see that it is a server-side component now, because everything that is happening now for this component is basically controlled by the server. Okay. Now we can now visualize our user array, right? So we can go ahead and bring back this code and see what the user looks like. So let's save this. So we don't have this. Okay, good. So as you can see now, we have our users list displayed, right? So if we click on this, it should definitely bring our user information. So why we are having that is because we already created that handler here, right? So we have get users by ID already designed here, okay? Are we together? So now we can also ensure that this fetch is also server side. So let's go ahead and look at one exception, okay? So now so we can see the users on our browser. Good, so it still shows server side, okay? So you can see that this is typically already a server side component. Are we together? Okay, all right, excellent. I'm happy you're following. So I think at this point, I'll just take questions, because we are pretty much done with looking at what's happening here. So basically, what you need to understand is the app component automatically, or by default, is a server-side component. Okay, so, it's a server-side page rendering system, right? So what happens is, for scenarios where you want to utilize use effects, or have handlers like on clicks and all that, you will need to mark those pages with the use client tag, okay? That is this tag. So once you mark it with this tag, automatically it converts it to a client-side rendering page, okay? So let's do something. So let's add this use client here, and then let's see what happens on the browser. Okay. So you can see the continuous rendering that is happening. Because this is already an async component. But if we remove this async from here now, okay, we cannot use await anymore. We will need to utilize our use effect to handle that fetch. Okay? Hold on. Let's bring this back. And then with this, okay, so we have some things not imported. Use state, use effects. Okay, good. Now, let's remove this use client from here so that you understand. So as you can see now, you see the error that is being shown. You know, we showing that file had an error, and then you are importing a component that needs use effect. This React hook only works in a client component. To fix, mark this file or its parent with the use client directive. Do you understand now? Do you get the whole concept now of client side, server side, and why we are using all these things? Exactly. So now once I mark this as a client side, it will work because now we're now telling the browser that this particular page is a page that we want to utilize client-side rendering on. So what we are saying is in the whole of this application, every page on default is a server-side rendered page, but we can mark them as client-side rendered pages where necessary, based on what we are trying to achieve with those components. Then for the ones that we don't want to mark like that, we can allow them to we can utilize the async method to make sure that those components are automatically or by default server-side rendered pages. Okay, are we together? Okay, Udo, are you with me? Michelle, is there anything you don't understand holistically, like with everything we've done? Is there anything you don't really understand that you want us to touch again? Okay, all right. And Mohammed, how about you? Have you seen the previous classes? Are you clear on every concept that we've handled, especially with regards to server-side rendering? Exactly, yes. Okay, all right, excellent. Okay. So I believe that if you find this in your tax, it will not stress you out. So you understand the difference, what we are doing when we are talking about handling stuff from the client side and handling things from the server side. Okay. So basically let me see. So I think that's basically what I want to cover with regards to client side. You can actually utilize all your actions, do your whole CRUD actions using either way, whether it's the client side or the server side, whichever way you want to handle your application, right? So you can pretty much do all those delete, view, uh, updates, and all that. Okay, excellent. I'm very happy you understand. So just a little recap, SSR, that is server-side rendering, is default in app router. Okay, all server components. That means all the components are server-side components until marked with the use client tag, right? Or should we call it batch? Okay. Then we have the fetch, which is like a provision of NextJS that we use to handle fetch. Then for us to make sure that our fetch is or our action is client side, is server side completely. We want to add a catch no store, which would potentially say ensure all data is fresh, right? So we don't want to have stale data, which is one of the advantages of server side rendering. The fact that you don't have stale data, you always have fresh data. Okay. All right, okay. Then yeah, so basically API routes and all that. Um, so for client components, like I said, for us to utilize client components, they should be marked. So once you are working with forms on click, just basically event handlers and all that, side effects like use effect and hooks and all that, you want to mark those kind of components and avoid using server side for those kind of components to ensure that you don't encounter errors. Okay. All right. So one more thing that I would like to add is for your applications, understanding where to use when working with Next.js, understanding when to use server side and when not to use server side is very important. Okay, so for me, I always advise that you mix both server and client. There are some exceptions that you want to handle on a very like a client component, and then there's some kind of work you want to dedicate to server handlers, right? So you want some stuff to be handled directly from the server, you want some to be handled on the client side. So you want to have that mix. Okay, so you want to mix server plus client components so that you can have like server handles, your SSR, client handles, actions, stuff like that. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah, so they can actually. So they are the ones handling when a component is being run by the server, is like saying, I want the server to detect what the user sees. So everything is based on what the server is delivering. So the server is no longer delivering. Initially, when we are doing client side, we first of all deliver empty HTML, then API calls, then we now add data to that HTML, right? Using use effect and all that to handle fetching and display. Okay. But now, when we are talking about server side, the server is handling the delivery of your HTML with data. So now you are not going to be delivering just HTML and JavaScript to your users anymore. You are delivering everything at once. So the server is handling the whole packaging of your HTML and delivering plus data to your users. Do you understand? So that way now, that's why the advantage is that there's always fresh data. Like you don't always there's no time when you have stale data delivered to the client. Do you get like delivered to the browser? You're always delivering fresh data to the browser when utilizing server-side rendering. Okay. But yes, of course, it has its drawbacks. I think I mentioned those in the last class. You can still go ahead and do your own research. I encourage you do your own research and see how you can buttress on the ideas that I have put in your mind. Okay? All right. So this class was supposed to be a very short class, and I believe that we've achieved what we are here for. We all understand what we've done so far, correct? Correct? Are we together? We all understand, right? And this today, I'm very confident that we all was following. So I believe it's a good day. All right. Okay. All right. So thank you all for joining today's class. Yeah. Unfortunately, it was a short one. I hope we'll see you again. I think we'll still have one more class this week. I'll fix a class this week where we'll just do a little brush off. I think there are like one concept that I would like us to still look at in Next.js before we move into our project phase. Okay. Look out for your last promotional tags. For those who are still behind on tags, please try and meet up with the rest. Don't give up, even if you are on tax 4, you still have time. I advise the easiest way to get things done is to get busy with it. So get on it, connect with your colleagues who are doing well, see how they can help you out. Yeah, you're welcome, Michelle. So see how they can help you out. And for those who understand better, try to accommodate others. Try to make room to teach others. Make room to help others grow too. Okay. By helping others grow, you are also growing. All right. Thank you everyone for joining today's class. I look forward to seeing you guys in our next class. Have a nice day ahead. Bye everyone.